want to move to number 10? I was just thinking that way you wouldn't have down and back. I mean, I don't care.
Before we start nodding off.
Let me see. I got one letter that said we are against the variance because rules are there for a reason. That was their only objection, so.
99% of people say.
Well, actually, there's
Checking real quick. Normally, there'd be a whole bunch of negative publicity sitting here on our desk, so. I have a ton of experience with it.
First and second, everybody.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, they do.
Okay.
Did your boy participate?
They do something different at the Seaside School. They have something called the Great Shake competition where they elimination competition down to a few kids at the end.
Yeah.
And Farm Bureau.
FFA, isn't it?
Kristen, you ready? At this time, we will call the July 22nd, 2021 Walton County Zoning Board Adjustment meeting to order. If you would, please stand as we have our invocation followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
Dear Lord, thank you for the opportunity to live in this great nation. Please guide us here tonight to do what's best for our county and our citizens. Amen.
Amen.
Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which stands one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. You may be seated. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank all the board members that are here tonight. We have 6 out of 7. Mr. Burgess had a previous engagement that he was unable to attend, but we do have 6 out of 7, so everyone should have a good opportunity to have 4 out of the 6, hopefully to pass the variance that you're requesting. We appreciate Kristen filling in for Karen. Karen is out for a couple of weeks. We were expecting having a good attorney tonight, Jennifer, but however, we stuck with Mr. Hayward. We're glad to have you. We appreciate planning department be represented by Stephen and the attorney for the planning department, Mr. Hall. We look forward to a good meeting. Are there any announcements need to be made this time?
No announcements on the legal front. None of the appeals have come back. No new appeals have been filed since our last meeting, so we're kind of just status quo at this point.
Too late for them to be filed? Not necessary, because we ain't signed the order, have we, on the last?
No, but I don't know that any of them were contentious last month. But yeah.
Deal.
Yeah, that was like 2 months ago, or right at 2 months ago. And then we had the order. You remember the Kaya?
That's where the gentleman lives in Tallahassee, keeps giving these people a hard time, and they went and filed the appeal last time. They gave him a bunch of money, and he come back, and he wants a bunch more money. Is that what's that about?
Well, yeah, the case that we had was not that, but yes, there was some of that, I think.
Yeah, that one's just,
It's still going?
it's appealed to the circuit.
You remember they had appealed 2 decisions that were made by the planning department, and that's what this board had to decide whether or not to overturn the planning director's decision, which this board voted not to turn over the planning director's decision.
So they're appealing our,
Correct.
To the circuit court. And sometime in 2027, it should get a decision from the judge,
Hopefully before that.
hopefully. At this time, we ask each and every person here that plans to speak before this board, if you would stand, raise your right hand, and swear that the testimony that you give would be the truth to the best of your knowledge. If you would, please stand, raise your right, Mr. Hayward.
Do you all swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Stephen, I think we had a couple that we need to address before we get started. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, it is. The Duneside Variance, item number 8, the applicant has rescinded the application for variance.
8?
Yes, sir.
That is just, that's gone, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Are there any others?
There are just 2 requests to continue at the front of the agenda for you.
The first one is the appeal. Wiley Hutchison and Coastal Custom Home Builders appeal is going to continue to August? Are they asking to continue to the August meeting?
I believe so, yes.
That date on that is what date?
The 26th.
Motion to continue that to the August 26th.
Make a motion to continue to the August 26th meeting.
Second. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
What about the next one? Lot 1, Block E, Village of Blue Mountain Beach variance is continued to August 26th. Wait, it's right there in front of me, isn't it?
Yes, sir, it is.
I guess I'm not used to that. Motion to continue lot
Motion
1,
to-
Block E.
This,
Motion to continue to the,
if I may, I apologize.
Go ahead.
This is a request by staff. We believe that the notice to the surrounding neighbors was insufficient. I believe the applicant would like to discuss that further if the board would hear him.
Sure. Sure. State your name for the record.
My name is David Buchanan. So the application that we sent out, we felt that it had everything that we were told that it was supposed to have. You know, it had, basically we submitted what we were told to from the planning department. We turned everything into the planning department. They originally, correct me if I'm wrong, Stephen, but from when he first looked at it, he didn't see anything wrong with it. It wasn't until somebody sent an email to complain that they said, well, now that we have an email to complaining, we're going to go ahead run it up. I believe you took it to your boss and then went to the county lawyers. But either way, at some point they came back and said, well, now we think that you need to have more description in it. Even though I feel that what we did, I believe what we did, I shouldn't say I
Let me
feel.
ask you a question. Do you want to continue this, or do you want us to hear it?
I would like you guys to hear it and grant it today, but I don't want, I mean, this is my first time asking for a variance like this, so
What I think we would do is just, well, you're next up, but we're gonna give you the opportunity. He is the next up, right?
I thought, oh.
Obviously, as this board knows, one of the main factors is to allow for due process, not only for the applicant, but any adjacent property owners or nearby owners who may be affected by this variance. So what's the issue on the notice?
So the applicant the applicant is correct. We did receive the copy of the letter and affidavit and certified receipts. I typically don't look at them until closer to the meeting. The applicant is also correct. I received 2 emails indicating that they don't know what the variance is for, so I took it upon myself to review the letter and the code. The letter states that they are seeking a variance. The code does ask that, or require that there is substance to the request in the mail notice itself. What code section, what's the dimension, if it's a setback variance, those sort of things is what staff would expect to see in the mailing. It wasn't there. That may have been a breakdown in the conversation or understanding that the applicant and staff had. But nonetheless, staff would expect, based on the code requirements, that there's more information than just simply variance in the letter itself.
If I may.
Please.
Just hang on a minute. Just hang on a minute. Exactly what does the code say? Does the code say that you can send a letter out requesting a variance?
Yes, well, the code requires that there's a mailing notice for any quasi-judicial hearing. As part of the numbered requirements that have to be addressed in the notice itself, one of them speaks to, and forgive me, I did not expect a challenge on the request, but it speaks to the substance of the request. It asks for more detail, in my opinion, as well as our land use attorney's opinion.
Does he submit?
A site plan and a project description are supposed to accompany the letter itself.
That is correct.
So did we only get the letter sent out?
No, there was a site plan and there was an aerial photograph of that as well. Folks that look at these things every day certainly can see what they're requesting. Not everybody does. And I think that's the intent of that notice letter language and I can pull it up if you'd like.
Well, let me ask you, are you ready? You are to send letters out certified for notice.
Yes, sir.
The man did that.
Yes, sir.
That notice is to give that person the opportunity to call your office to get the information, what's going on. Is that correct?
That is part of the reasoning behind the notice. Yes, sir.
Okay. I mean, then what point are we going to allow the ones that receives the notice to play ignorant to the fact they don't know how to pick up the phone and inquire about notice that was given?
Yes, sir. That is a fine line.
I don't think it's a fine line. They received the notice. If you receive notice, then you have the right to contact those that's in charge to find out. It's not up to the applicant to present his case at that time. Is that correct?
No, it's not up to the applicant to present his case, certainly, but it is up to the applicant to provide enough detail for the receivers of those mailings to clearly.
What did he provide?
He provided that they're seeking a variance.
And he provided site plan.
Yes, sir.
He provided a survey?
Not a survey, but an aerial photograph parcel.
The site plan was the survey.
Let's hear from Mr. Hall.
Mr. Chairman, good questions all. You know, the only reason that we would ask for a continuous in this matter is just to make sure we have a solid decision should the board grant the variance. We like them to be as clean and as straightforward as they can be so that we don't have a third-party objection that ends up being an appeal to circuit court based on a due process issue.
Problem I have with that, Mr. Hall, is evidently this gentleman has the time clock ticking, that money's
can-
involved, and every day the expenses, and you taking you prolong, evidently that's why he don't want to go along with it.
Mr. Chairman, the reason that we asked for the continuance was to protect the applicant. If the applicant would like to move forward, then he's moving forward at his own risk, subject to whatever challenge may come from a problem with the notice. So if the petitioner would like to move forward, assuming the risk, then we're all for it.
We don't have his variance application in our binders
As a result of the request,
as a result of the county withdrawing it based on insufficient notice.
Mr. Buchanan, come back up to the podium.
Chairman, we can move the item to the end,
Oh, I know.
print the staff report and have it to you.
Let me talk to Mr. Buchanan. Now, do you understand that Mr. Hall and the planning department is trying to protect you as far as someone coming up and saying notice was not given, and therefore they have the right to appeal the decision of this board? Once they filed an appeal to decision of this board, then it goes to circuit court. And the circuit court is under a new judge where we have some that has been there, Mr. Dye's, 3 years, waiting on a decision. Now, you got a choice. Just like Mr. Hall said, you can go ahead and let us hear this, and they may appeal your decision, they may not. Or you can postpone it, we'll hear it in August, they may appeal your decision, they may not. But they won't have the grounds on notice.
Okay.
According to Mr. Hall and Mr. Stephen, that's the issue here, is that correct? So, Mr. Buchanan, it's up to you, I think.
Well, what I'm gonna ask the owner of the property, because he's here. Kurt?
You need to come up and state your name for the record.
My name is Kurt Bookert. I'd personally like to proceed. I mean, because it just at a point where we have $30,000 of lumber out there rotting every day. So I'd like to push forward if we can.
Can he sue the people that has filed a challenge to get his money for the lumber? Mr. Hall?
Not my business, Mr. Chairman.
Stephen, would it be difficult to come up with information so we can hear this, to present it at the end of the hearing?
No, it would take me 10 to 15 minutes to print out copies for everybody and hand them out.
The one that have to do that? I mean, do we need to take a break somewhere so that can be done?
If it would please the board, we could take a quick break, and I can go do that now, or after.
I'll
It's
tell
up
you
to you.
what, let's do. Let's hear about 4 or 5 of these things, and then usually they want to go out and smoke a cigarette and drink them some Cokes or whatever they do, whiskey. So let's hear 4 or 5 on Mr. Buchanan. We're going to listen to it, but you're going to be put at the last of the meeting. Is that all right? Yes. Okay. We don't need a motion on that, do we, Mr. Haver?
No, sir.
Item number 4, the Estrada condition used for the RV. Who's here? Come on up, ma'am. State your name for the record.
Lucerito Estrada.
You were sworn in, right? You raise your right hand and tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, and all that good stuff.
Yes, sir.
Got $50 a pass, right? No? What you want us to do for you?
We were just trying to use the property for conditional use, and get the light pole and everything ready to, maybe in the future put in a mobile home or something there on that property.
Okay, you done a conditional use on lot number 4, block 59, Oakwood Hills, Unit 3, and that's gonna be off of what road is that?
Girl Scout Road?
Girl
Girl Scout Road?
Daisy Lane, isn't it?
Yes. Daisy Land and Girl Scout Road.
Just on a mobile home out there. And you understand that we can grant you that conditional use, but according to, and I fought this as hard as I could, you can't live in it as a permanent resident. That
Okay.
you understand that you have to agree to move it off from time to time and bring it back. You understand that?
Yes, sir.
Any questions? Have a seat up front for me. Mr. Stephen, what you think?
If I could have the staff report entered in the record, please, thank you. The request satisfies the standards for conditional use in this zoning district. There's no issues, really.
Are there anyone here in favor of it or in opposition of it? Is anyone has any comment? Mrs. Estrada, anything, you want to say anything else? You don't think it's necessary? Okay. Motion to close the public discussion?
Motion to close public discussion.
Second? Motion? Second?
Second.
Discussion? I got scolded last time. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
You have your conditional use. Congratulations. Item number 5. Submitted by E.J. Van Herden, LLC, as I say that correctly? Hedren? Hedren. Go ahead. State your name for the record.
Eric Van Heteren.
What can we do for you today?
In the process of Mr. Sofsky building his house with Tab Jackson Building Group, they're putting in a pool along with footings and a pool enclosure, screen pool enclosure. When they laid out the footings and poured all that stuff in there, they came out 3 feet up onto the setback. So Mr. Sofsky's requesting that he can get that 3 feet or 20% of that setback for his screen pool enclosure. Footings, everything already being there, and everything else.
We sure been having problems with these pools.
Yeah, I was just responsible for building the enclosure, and I'm just trying to help him out, so all that stuff is already
You're
there.
responsible for this?
I'm not for this, no.
Not for this.
No, just for building the actual aluminum structure and screen on top of these footings and
Who's
pool deck and
responsible
everything.
for the pool?
That would have been Tab Jackson Building Group with the, and Mr. Stofsky,
Why
I guess.
aren't they here?
I don't know. Mr. Stofsky asked me to help him out with this issue, so that's what we're trying to.
Is the pool, is it just your part that you building, or is it?
No, it's the pool deck, all the structural footings for the actual enclosure.
But the pool itself is not, is.
The pool is within the setback, right?
This is-
It's just a pool deck along with the concrete footings for the actual aluminum structure and screen.
How big is the pool?
Pool or the pool enclosure itself?
How much, the pool itself?
Good
I
question.
guess what I'm trying to get to, why did it happen? Look like you have a lot of property there to take and build on, and I don't understand how in the world that, if I'm looking at this right.
I don't know how it happened either. All that stuff was there when we got involved with the project.
We've
So they-
already built the screen enclosure.
we did for Mr. Stofsky.
Somebody file a code enforcement?
No, I think it was on their CO inspection. I think it was noticed then.
This was not on the originally approved planning document?
I don't think so, no.
Because it appears the pool and the structure itself are within the setback.
Yeah, the actual home itself and the pool are within the setbacks, yeah. It's just whenever they did the pool deck and poured these footings for the pool enclosure, they poured it 3 feet out onto the setback where all the main footings are. It's a 3-post structure with a beam, screen wall, screen roof.
Did the shop drawings for the screen enclosure, did you have a copy of the survey?
We did not, no. Well, actually, no, at that time, we were just given the actual sketch dimensions of the actual pool deck and whatnot. We didn't get the actual survey until this issue came up with the builder, the home builder and the owner.
Guess it's safe to say in the future, you'll probably get a survey before you install a screen
Absolutely, that's absolutely correct. This is a lesson well learned for everybody.
Sure?
Sure.
The pool deck and pool,
They were, yes, sir. Because it's a paver pool deck, or it's actually a tile pool deck that has footings that they poured around there. They poured large footings for the actual 3 columns, and then a ribbon footing in between them for the attachment of the bottom plate to hold the screen in place.
I think,
but I don't
So
understand.
I think until he put the screen enclosure there, it didn't actually violate code, because the pool deck can encroach into the rear setback.
Right.
So, and it was okay until they built the vertical enclosure.
Yeah, well, on all the other inspections, everything, it was never noticed because there was no vertical on there at that point.
Passed every foundation
Setback
inspection.
goes to the water line.
Correct. Because it's at grade.
Do what?
The pool was not a violation or the
Right.
pool deck until they enclosed it with screening.
The deck can be in the setback.
Correct.
How far in the setback? And is any,
Well, it's my understanding that the county has updated the pool deck to within, is it 4 feet of the?
I think it can go 5 feet
5 feet, yeah.
typically.
Okay. So it didn't violate any rules until the screen enclosure, and now it's 2 feet into the setback, is that?
It's 3 feet into the 15-foot setback. Now, it does back up to basically wooded land. There's a cemetery back there. I don't think there's any home building going to go in there anytime soon or anything like that.
cemetery back there?
There is, yes, sir. For future use for a cemetery, hasn't quite expanded back in there, but it's a cemetery property.
Have a seat.
Okay, thank you.
Stephen?
If I could have the staff report enter in the record, please.
So enter.
Thank you. Well, this, appears to be from the application itself, a construction or survey in error. It doesn't satisfy those minimum hardship and circumstance requirements of the code. But, it seems awfully, 6 inches, 9 inches, those sort of things seem a reasonable mistake. This just seems excessive in this instance, but I don't know the circumstance on the ground.
Problem with these, they can go, like Jeff said, they can build the deck. You said 5 feet, 4 or 5 feet inside the setback. They get plans, they get approved for it, then they come back and they can put without staff really knowing what's going on. Is that correct?
So they would have to get a permit approval for the covering as well. That would be considered an accessory
Yeah,
structure.
but that can come back a year later.
Yes, absolutely, yes. So you mean as far as where the footings are poured to support that structure? Yes, staff would not know. It wouldn't be in any sort of planning documents where the footings would necessarily be.
Because the deck is allowed within the setback.
Yes, sir, the deck is allowed
A
within
year
the
later,
setbacks.
they come back and want to put a frame on it, that now they're encroaching.
Right, they would be with the structure. the cover, yes, sir.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone here has any opposition? Anyone here to speak for this? Anyone has any concern? You have any final thing to say? Well, let me ask you this. Come up. We got to move along, but from the time the pool was completed and the deck was put in, when did they all of a sudden decide they want to put a structure over it?
It was after they poured the pool deck and put the footings and all that stuff.
Central, say a month after, 3 months after, a year after?
It's been quite a while, so I would say probably a month or two, maybe 3 months max, something like that.
Mosquitoes got eating them up pretty bad and they need relief, right?
Yeah, that would probably be the case.
This is kind of a health issue, is that correct?
Sure, yes, sir. That's
Gotcha.
absolutely right.
Thank you. You got something to add?
We did consider that. The problem with that is that underneath the tile is just compacted dirt and soil and, aggregate. The actual structural support for the enclosure, that whole pool deck would have to be ripped out, all that concrete footings, the large column footings and the ribbon footings would have to be removed, repoured, new pool deck put down. It's like a travertine type tile pool deck that goes over the footings, on the perimeter footing for the screen enclosure. Yes, sir. Well, however they compact the, around the pool itself between the footings and the actual pool coping. No, there's no concrete slab under there. Yeah. Just the perimeter. Yeah, that is an option. That is serious expense for him as well, though.
Are you bearing the brunt of responsibility for the mistake being made?
Well, I've been doing this a long time, so we should have caught that. So yes, it is a very good learning experience for us to make sure that this kind of stuff doesn't happen or we catch it in time. But my issue was by the time we got involved with the project, all that stuff was already there. It was put in by the actual home builder when they were doing the pool work and all that stuff. It was kind of out of our hand at that point.
It's already built. The screen's already built.
Yes, sir. We wanted to make sure it got up for life safety, issues, and it's acting as a safety barrier for the pool and all that too.
Mosquito.
Mosquitoes, yes, sir,
Thank you.
and flies.
Thank you. Motion closing
Snakes.
public discussion. Second.
Second.
All in favor, aye? Motion. Y'all want to take a break and come back?
Make a motion to approve the variance from minimum yard setback from 15 feet to 12 feet to be tied to the survey for that footprint in the referencing the survey that was already provided
Second.
That for the screen enclosure.
for the screen enclosure only.
Any discussion?
I'll speak to that. I think last week we had a swimming pool that we granted a variance to the pool itself being in that rear setback. In a similar situation where you have a pie-shaped lot, you don't have really a lot of impact to adjacent homeowners here, a few corridors.
Cemetery behind it.
And so I see how this mistake was made because of the delayed addition of the screen enclosure. So I think there's a financial burden to force the screen company to move all that structure back 3 feet when the impact is pretty minimal and we've already granted variances that exceed that.
How much were they asking last time that we grant? Was it a foot, 3 foot?
It was a 5-foot encroachment.
It was a 5 foot?
Well, it was just for the pool itself, but
Well, my question they were planning on doing, but then
you have the contractor and the footing guide putting that in, and then he comes along and puts the screen enclosure where he's told to put it, and now he's at fault.
but it was pre-planned. That's, it was pre-planned, but it didn't just happen the day he went to put the enclosure.
Is that what they call premeditated?
Not exactly, but
I agree. It seems like about every time we come down here, we have an issue with pools. At least, you know, he says he's not gonna come back before us with an issue like this.
We're not planning on it.
And the last one, I think they did ask before they built it, did they not? That last one
well, last month, yeah, they asked for the encroachment because of the pipe that ran along the side of the property.
Also brought to our attention that we probably got in a hurry on that, do you remember? And I think we need to start paying more attention to these pools, and sooner or later, I think we're gonna have to send, you know, deny some of them so the pool people start taking more caution
Technically,
of
the
what
pool
they do.
does not violate the setback.
Yeah, but, you know, it's real easy to get by if you take and you plan it, say, well, we'll do it, come back later and do it, and go before the planning board, they're a yes vote. And I don't mind helping homeowners. It's not, nobody's here in opposition, nobody's here for it, like the cemetery. We have a motion, we have a second, we had discussion. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye.
I'm gonna vote no on it, just because. 2? So you got your 4. You got your variance.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Board.
Yep. I got scolded last month and I ain't got over it. But you-
Thank Mr. Henderson.
So it's your time tonight. Now I'm
Mr.
gonna get
Henderson
even.
was no.
I voted no.
Yeah. Yeah, Mr. Henderson.
I believe at this time we have the 6th issue, and after this one, we'll take a break, but this is a Baker variance, and our board member, Mr. Jeff Check, is the one that will present it. As you know, you can't vote on this, Jeff. Yeah. Jeff.
Swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? All right, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I was gonna let it slide. Then there would have been appeal. Then we had to do it over again. All right, Jeff, what you asking?
I just want to say that having been through this process now on the other side, I have a lot of empathy and respect for all the effort that goes into all the requirements to even be here right now. Very time consuming, and my hat's off to everybody that has to go through this process.
Do you feel bad for saying no to all of those who voted against where we voted for? I was picking at you. Go ahead.
So this neighborhood, Gulf Trace, is where I moved in 1996 when I came down here after college. Rented an apartment in homes here in Gulf Trace, and so I have a special place in my heart for the neighborhood. And one of the things that's been bothering me about this and every other neighborhood that we build in is that as these homes get bigger and bigger, we seem to take more and more of the native vegetation and the topography of the site to flatten out and make room for houses and the parking requirements. So this has a fairly significant parking requirement based on square footage. And this site also has what I would consider to be exceptional topography, where you have an 18-foot property. So you have a 12-foot fall from the high point to the low point on the lot. But this issue boils down to, there's two variance requests that we're making, but both are in relation to saving the native vegetation on the site. And I've printed out some larger photographs that I'd like to enter into the record.
We're going to enter those as applicant 1.
This is
Thank you.
standing at the corner of Gulf Shore and Gulf Bridge. Notice the only vegetation, anybody else need one? The only vegetation on the site is in this corner here. The rest of the site is barren and has been previously disturbed from previous. So when we first started drawing plans for the project, we set out to save all of this corner, so we could save all the trees, reduce the developed area and to this area. And what we realized was that we needed more square footage, and that square footage also required more parking. So one of the ways that I could have met the parking requirement would be to cut down all the trees in the corner and have that cut in, and we would have to park all the cars here and make this parking lot. So we decided that the best thing for the property was to create a second curb cut so that we could park this here. We have additional directly across the street from this house is one of the older homes in the neighborhood, which has a circular driveway and 2 curb cuts. The majority of the Gulfront homes in the neighborhood have 50-foot wide concrete curb cuts to meet their parking requirements. So it's only a recent thing with the land development code where they restricted development to a single curb cut. This being on a corner, we felt that it was more reasonable to increase the street frontage, have the curb cuts pushed far away from the corner. So if this lot had been split into 2 lots,
When did they change the code?
majority of the houses in Gulf Trace kind of predate some of these rules. So in this case, we felt that saving the topography and the trees was a more desirable outcome than meeting the language of the code and creating hardship with a clean sheet of paper. I feel that this design solution is more desirable for
you're gonna take that's approximately a third of the lot, an eighth of the lot,
significant.
one-fifth of the lot you're gonna leave in preservation, is that correct?
This area here is, so 15 feet here.
Say that again.
This is the building setback here.
Right, so you could build back to that
But
line,
we could put parking here.
right,
We're choosing not to put parking.
right.
So the only thing we're giving up is this distance.
Will there be a recorded easement as far as not ever being disturbed unless a storm comes through? In other words, if the variance is granted, they're not gonna come in next week and tear it down, are they?
Feel like that's necessary for the outcome, then written into the language.
Well, I have a problem with the county changing in 2017 that you can't do it. You got two streets there, you know? You put them away from one another.
I recall the board granting the multiple curb cut for other situations on a number of occasions, but we still have to get permission to do it. And so that's the first item that we're requesting, to be able to have the second curb cut.
That the only item you have before us? You got another one?
Have a second item is the house with the reduced footprint does not have the square footage needed to meet the client's program. Gulf Trace has a height limit.
Should we do this
Want
one
to
at a
vote
time?
separately?
That's up to the board. You could hear both of them, but I would, you would probably want to handle any votes as separate votes for variance request 1 and variance request 2.
Variance request 1 has nothing to do with variance request 2, correct?
They're very much linked together.
So if you don't get one, then you can't get the second one. If you don't get the second one, you don't need the first one.
Correct.
Hear both of them and make the decision.
I think that would be best.
Okay, go ahead.
So, once we got into the design of the house, we realized that we needed a family room area on the property. And so, the only option was to stretch the length of the building out to increase the size of the home. Or we came up with utilizing the space inside of the attic as habitable space. So the original concept of the house observation deck. Then, we felt that was an opportunity to add the square footage to the house without increasing the footprint. So we stretched the staircase up to the top floor. This roof line would be there regardless of it. if we're allowed to put conditioned space here, that would avoid us.
You're just gonna have a observation deck up there anyway with a set of steps going.
Right, the thing that changed is now there's doors here, and there is attic that would be air conditioned. This showing here. That would be
So the shape, the overall shape of the house, yeah, correct. Not changing.
right.
If you eliminated the,
If you say no,
then it still looks the same.
house will get bigger. Won't get taller,
But I
but
mean,
it'll have to
the
get
height,
bigger.
I'm speaking of
Right.
height.
So we're not impacting people's
But
In
what,
fact, I go back to this sheet here. So the neighbors that are trying to look out the gulf, we broke the house down into smaller parts. So you have Karen's house here, leaving a big gap in between the two structures. So if you look, record.
Applicant D,
Two.
so entered.
I have three.
Oh, you want to go ahead and enter that now?
Give
All right.
these guys both because probably hard to see.
Thank you. What's the code on the third floor? I thought you allowed to have 3 stories.
It varies in different areas of the county based on where you're at. Certain areas you can go 3 stories, others you can't.
So Gulf Trace was written with a 45-foot height limit and 2 stories.
By the county?
I think Gulf Trace originally had that requirement, and that's why the majority of the houses in there are built on stilts. Everybody pushed their habitable space up to the height limit, and then they left the space underneath for parking and everything else. Over time, a lot of people have closed that in, and so that picture is clearly a 3-story house, but it was built up on a big plinth. So
Other areas of the county, you allow the 3-story
allowed 4 stories.
area. Okay.
The 50-foot height limit, 4 stories. This is a 45-foot height limit. So we meet the 45-foot height limit requirement. But in lieu of making the building footprint larger, we feel that making use of the space inside the attic is actually better for Gulf Trace as a whole because there's less impact to the site.
Where's Gautreaux at? What section township?
Gulf Trace, that's just west of Grayton Beach.
I got you.
You're at, all of them were filled up where they closed them in. And I guess to make that limit.
Right, because there's no flood zone issue there, so that doesn't make any sense for all those houses to be built on pilings because there was never a chance of a wave crashing through the neighborhood.
Technically, you could do the same thing. You could build it on pilings and then come out and close it in.
Not asking to do that.
Technically, you could.
What we'd rather do is get permission to have it.
Is to do it right to start with.
Correct.
Okay. Go ahead.
Room on the property, if you didn't get your variance to increase your square footage and add that extra parking for the square footage,
So,
if you cut down all the trees?
so we can mow the whole site down,
And it would
flatten it
fit.
out. And some of the other people in Gulf Trace have done that, and I think the results are less desirable. This is a very prominent corner as you enter into the neighborhood and you start to wind around Gulf Shore Drive where all the major Gulf front houses are. This corner is at the top of the hill. It's very prominent.
Yeah.
What we want to do is keep those indigenous trees at
But
the
it would-
corner and
it-
that,
It fits without them, though. Well, like, if you took the trees out, you could fit it, but this would save the trees.
absolutely.
Yeah.
We could
Okay.
build a 10,000 square foot house here,
Okay,
meet the parking requirements,
that's what I was getting at, yeah.
flatten it completely smooth, build a retaining wall. There's no rules that are prohibiting us from doing very undesirable things as
Okay.
a developer.
That's what I was getting
If he
at.
was there for the money, he could divide it and build 2 houses on it, right?
I don't know the answer to that question, but
Sure.
I would not advise him to do that. This is one of the lots that, as a young architect, I always felt that I'd like the opportunity to design a house for, so it was a great pleasure when he called and said he wanted me to take a look at it. And I want to do right by the property and by the neighborhood.
Yeah, but what you're asking for is minimum to what could be done for it. You could ask for a lot split, is that right? Can't ask for a lot split? The zone would prohibit it, but he could build a big old giant house on it and have wedding parties on it. Okay. Jeff, anyone have any questions? Do you have any, you covered your bases? You have anything else you want to add?
Done with my part. I will say that a lot of people in Gulf Trace did call and ask questions because in Gulf Trace, you're required to give notice to everybody that lives in Gulf Trace, not just within 300 feet. So we sent that notice out 30 days before we did the formal variance process. We did get a lot of people in support, and we gentleman that was in opposition just because he didn't feel like didn't really understand the merits.
Have a seat. Stephen. What do you think?
If I could have the staff report entered into the record, thank you. So this is a unique situation for a number of reasons. One, and I don't know if Mr. Chick pointed it out, but the Gulf Trace Neighborhood Plan does actually speak to preservation of natural vegetation on site. There's not an actual requirement, but it does place some importance on the native vegetation. Right? I wanted to make sure that's in the record. Additionally, this just doesn't holistically doesn't appear to satisfy the minimum requirements of the code, based solely on just the reasonable use kind of understanding, right? The applicant could decrease the square footage of the house and not be required to provide as much parking, and that's kind of the driving effect here. While we certainly understand and appreciate the desire to save that vegetation, the request just doesn't meet those minimum code requirements.
Be a hardship because of the county continue to burden with regulations and restrictions on property rights of the 2017 not allowing, that was allowed?
Certainly. I mean, that provides burden, but it doesn't provide burden as to the point of hardship defined in the code.
We understand.
Great.
Thank you.
No problem.
Anyone here in opposition? Anyone here supportive? Do you have anything else you want to add?
Yes, our clients could build a smaller house, but they could also build a significantly larger house and still meet the code requirements because there is no preservation requirement while it is encouraged, so we're doing that on our own volition, not required by the code.
I think it's a give. County says it doesn't meet. I think it does meet because you're giving. You're giving less building that you could build. You're giving preservation where you don't have to. You're not building a big eyesore down there, a 10,000 square foot house with parking going to rent out. The guy's trying to do something nice for the neighborhood. And there again, we appreciate the staff opinion, but we don't agree with it, and that's why we're here. We have the opportunity to correct the code whenever the hardship is provided because of the plan to continue to make hardship for the property owners. You good?
Good.
Motion to close the public discussion.
Motion to close.
Motion. Oh, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Do I have a motion?
Correct.
Motion we approve the variance to driveway.
Second. Discussion?
Is he going to do it? I thought we were going to do it all together.
No, we're not. We're doing one at a time.
Okay.
He was clear on his motion. We have a motion and a second. Approve the variance for the driveways. Allow 2 driveways. We have a motion and a second. Discussion? Discussion?
I think overall it's helping the neighborhood. I think it's beneficial to grant the variance. I think there's,
Any other? All in favor, aye?
aye.
Motion on the second request. You making a motion to approve the variance for the Gautreaux neighborhood plan to allow for the 3rd story of living space, a second? Discussion?
I think it's good for the neighborhood, and it's in the attic that would normally be there anyway. It's not really affecting anything.
I think you need to have a.
He has that, they can't do that for code, they would have to ask the variance for it, they can't ask the variance for that, so that's the code, building department's gonna make sure that don't happen. And the neighbors, I can assure you, you know, the neighbors. But if you wanna put it in the motion, but I don't think it's necessary.
Just saying the 3rd floor.
Okay, the motion, I think, that's what you said, right? And that was your second, right? Discussion?
I still think it's the same.
Any other further?
I think that's a good deal. I thought for going out the way to keep the best
Yep.
vegetation and not make the whole lot level like you said that's good done. I believe we can keep that.
Yep. I agree, Paul. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Done a good job, Jeff. Let's take us a 10-minute break. You're gonna get the items for number 2, Mr. Buchanan. It's kind of like we've asked them to wait on us to get this prepared, so I'm not so sure we shouldn't be courteous and let them and put him at back. He said he's willing to do that. Thank you. Appreciate it, Stephen.
Yeah.
Not a problem. Where did Jeff go? Come on, Jeff. We're going to call the meeting back to order. We're going to go ahead and continue with item number 7. This is Stephen with Matthews Jones LLP. Are you long-winded tonight, or are you short?
I hope I am short. Stay won't.
Yes, sir.
Stephen Tatum from Matthews and Jones, here on behalf of the applicant, Brittany and Brandon Sigler. Got something I want to give you guys, some stuff that was not included in the packets that I prepared to be demonstrative.
Applicant Exhibit A. I'm asking you, A? So entered.
All right. Good afternoon, or evening, I guess it is now. Just wanted to start off by kind of telling you a story about what this is about. I won't take too long, but so Brandon and Brittany Sigler, they were married back in 2013, moved down here in 2016 from Tennessee. Both of them started a business. Businesses took off, became profitable. In 2020, during the middle of COVID, while they were still, the business were still kicking really well, and still are today, they bought a house in Sacred Oaks subdivision. House itself, great looking house. There's pictures included in there if you want to just flip through while I talk. When they bought the house, they had plans. They were looking for something specifically that either had a garage or had the ability to put a shed in the backyard, because he has a lot of equipment. He likes to smoke, smoke meats, not cigarettes or other things. So he needed to have room for storage for stuff like that. And this house was on the market. They went and looked at it. Beautiful backyard. They were assured they could build a shed. They'd be able to put a pool back there. Whenever they had kids soon, they would be able to put swing set, playground equipment, that sort of thing in the backyard. There was no garage, so they had the need for the shed. I provided you a survey showing the variance area. You see that orange in the very, very first page on what I gave you. That's our problem. The builder, whenever he built the house, apparently constructed a retaining wall along the back property line and backfilled the lot, put in a lawn. It looks gorgeous. I don't know if you've seen the pictures yet or not, but I mean, it looks good. Right behind that is a part of, I guess that's part of Mac Bayou, actually. And the water's not really up in there, but there's definitely a wetland area. The plat for Sacred Oaks, which you can see on in the packet, I did you a close-up of Lot 1, which is their lot, shows a 25-foot wetland buffer, which encumbers 25 feet of the back of their lot, the entire 25 feet of the back of their lot. The house, if you notice on the survey, on the, I guess that would be the northwest corner, is that 25-foot wetland buffer is within inches of our back corner. If you look on the, what would be the northeast corner, there's maybe about 4 feet. So essentially, if the wetland buffer were left in place, they would have no backyard. Now, mind you, this is not any fault of my clients at all. They just bought a house. So it came time for them to put their shed up. They went to the HOA. HOA gave them permission. They turned around, started building their shed. Someone apparently called and reported because there wasn't a building permit pulled. So stopped immediately. That was on March 30th that they got the letter, hey, you need a permit. They stopped. He was up here on April 1st, Brandon was, to request a building permit. On April 12th, Jason Catalano, doing his job, said, yeah, you can't build anything there. In fact, you've got to remove that retaining wall and restore it back to the wetland buffer as it was. So they came to me not long after that, and we played over some different ideas on what could be done. And ultimately, they can't use the house without the backyard. I mean, they have to have the backyard. And so we said, well, let's see if we can get a variance from this, because the comp plan says that you must provide a wetland buffer, but it doesn't say what the wetland buffer has to be. Land Development Code says 25 foot. We're now, in what you've got before you, basically says we're asking for no wetland buffer. But in order to address that, we went and had an environmental assessment done, which is included in your original packet from Stephen. And the environmental assessment.
Hang on.
Yes, sir.
You handed us this pamphlet.
Yes, sir.
There's a second page here, right?
Yes, sir.
Is that the little shed they built?
Yes, sir. That's the shed.
Is that the retaining wall they built?
They did not build the retaining wall.
Is that what Jason said they had to tear down?
They have to remove the shed and return everything from the retaining wall back to where the wetland buffer is at the edge of the house. Back to.
Wetland buffer begins at the retaining wall and go down to the woods.
Let me
The wetland buffer,
let me walk up here to you and tell you. All right, so let's look at the survey. This wall
Yep.
is is right here on the property.
Right?
The wetland buffer goes from the property line all the way south down. So all of that backyard is wet.
Okay.
What the plat.
So where's the wall? No,
Wall's on the property line.
Retaining wall is right on the property.
this is a piece of property that's
Yes.
in a wetland
Yes.
buffer. I got you now. Thank you. I'm a little slow. Thank you.
Even if you didn't have the 25-foot wetland buffer, the shed's in the 15-foot rear setback.
Well, and that may be an issue. I'm not sure what the accessory structure setback would be from, but that may be an issue.
So if you don't apply the 25-foot wetland buffer, you would apply a 15-foot rear setback, and
And
you've
then-
got a shed in the 15-foot rear setback.
And that hasn't come up, but if that is the case, then we would have to deal with that as well. But right now, the bigger question is, how do we keep the yard? Because moving the retaining wall, removing all that backfill, doing the mitigation, putting everything back to the way it was with, I mean, if you look at the pictures, this is not exactly a pristine wetland. But one thing I did want to mention, the environmental assessment, this is where I was at before we got sidetracked, but the environmental assessment that they did, which was done by Icarus Environmental Consulting, shows that the wetland is actually about 10 feet off of our back property line, the actual existing wetland as it is today. She went out, did a delineation, the stobs are out there now showing where they're at. There's pictures of those stobs included in the very last 2 pages of your packet. Well, one of them's circled, but you can't really see it real well. The other one you can see pretty clearly. So we're providing about a 10-foot buffer right now, as opposed to what was shown on the original plat. So we're still providing a 10-foot buffer for the wetland purposes. It's not a 0-foot buffer. Now, the homeowners association is in support of this. Obviously, there are other houses in the same situation along Mac Bayou right there. If you look at the aerial that's provided, which is that 11 by 17 piece that's in your packet.
How is the HOA approving structures in the platted setback?
Well, the HOA, I assume, only follows the architectural restrictions of their board.
Which would have a rear setback.
It would, but it doesn't necessarily have to meet what the county setback was when we had that same problem at White Cliffs, unfortunately. But this isn't an uncommon thing in that area. If you look along this 11 by 17 that I printed out.
The property that's, what direction is this wetlands in? Is that north, south, east, or west?
That is to the north. You're looking kind of northwest right there in
That
that picture.
property to the north, what is that?
That is part of Mac Bayou.
Is that part of designated?
Oh, it's common area to the association.
There is a large subdivision, right?
Yes, sir.
That common area that they are referencing there is a floodplain. Is that correct?
That's correct. Actually, all of that's in a flood zone, but yes, sir.
Yeah, but this is more of a floodplain when the tide is up and you get a hurricane, then it comes in there and it floods. And that's why they call it a common area. It's not a common area as far as walking or,
No, I mean, it cannot be disturbed. You could go into it, just like you could walk into any part of.
but you can't
the
ever
bayou.
build on it.
That's correct.
Where did the 25-foot wetland buffer come from?
The wetland buffer is part of the land development code.
Which says you have to be 25 feet from the wetland?
From wherever the wetland delineation line is, that was set, whenever the plat was approved, you have to be 25 feet the other side of that, away from the wetland.
What does your engineer, your
Our
environmental
environmental says that we're 10 feet away from the wetland line.
and you're supposed to be 25 feet?
That's correct.
So basically, you could get by with a 15
A 15-foot variance, yes, sir.
in the wetland buffer.
It would be a
But that
Well, it would be a 10-foot wetland buffer that's provided. We would need a 15-foot variance.
Does the 25-foot wetland buffer become a platted setback?
25-foot wetland buffer become a platted setback.
Plat's recorded.
Well,
The 25, I guess we can ask Stephen.
yeah, but Interesting question.
Setback, but it does supersede.
The 15-foot rear setback requirement. So when they label the 25-foot wetland setback on the plat, does that not become the new setback? Yes, please.
We have a real mixed bag all across the county in terms of when a wetland buffer, the 25-foot primary wetland buffer, is shown on a plat and when it's not. The rule of thumb is that we're no longer respecting what's shown on the plat in relation to a wetland buffer as some plat-related setback. It's measured from the wetland jurisdictional line, 25 feet landward of that line, regardless of what it says on the plat, in relation to the wetland buffer. Some older plats, because they're vested, that still matters. But on these more modern plats, it's case by case, depending on where the wetland.
Depending on where the people decide the wetland is, you could have a pretty wide swing in what that buildable area winds up being.
Currently, that's correct, depending on who your wetland jurisdictional expert is.
Mean high water line on a coastal dune lake.
Correct, and the mean high water line on the bay shoreline setback buffer, a 50-foot buffer on the bay, decided the same way. I got it?
So it's up to the engineer, the environmental engineer will determine where that line is, which could vary from one engineer to the other engineer.
Yes, it's usually a biologist or a botanist that does that, environmentalist.
But it varies.
Correct. Well, the methodology is the same. Where they put the stakes in sometimes can vary, up, landward or waterward a bit.
Okay.
But generally, there's a jurisdictional line that's already set by the DEP permits, where there are DEP permits related to the development.
But in this particular case, there will not be a DEP permit line established or DEP line established.
Yeah, I think we might be able to work with the current jurisdictional line setting if we were to recommend it. But I'm not sure what Stephen's recommendation is, but in relation to where the boundary line is of the wetlands, I think if you have a valid binding wetland jurisdictional line determination, we can work off of that line.
Do you have that?
At this time, I do not have that line. When we got this survey or the environmental assessment back in June, just in time to submit for this meeting, we did not have enough time to get a surveyor to go out and shoot the stobs because they're 2 months out. So we don't have an actual line showing where it is. So if that is something that the county would want to see, what we would request is that you grant the variance conditioned upon us providing the county with the county environmental, a survey showing where that jurisdictional line is today.
Let's say the 10 feet gained with the wetland moving pulls that line in plane with what should have been the 15-foot rear setback. Are you requesting to preserve the retaining wall or the shed?
I'm requesting to preserve it. Well, I see what you're saying, but that's not actually true because the setback for the shed would be measured off the property line, which actually hurts me. But you would have to measure that off of the property line, not off of where the jurisdictional wetland line is.
I'm saying that right now you have a 25-foot setback because they cut the lots along the original wetland line. And so you had a 25-foot setback. If the wetland's now moved, the wetland setback shifts back, but now the 15-foot.
Right, that still
rear
comes into
setback
play.
kicks
And
in.
so since that's not been reviewed, I can't request a variance for the shed today.
I have a real issue, you coming here and asking us to take and grant a variance on the wetlands whenever you know that there is a request that has to be done on the building. I mean, for me.
I did not know that there was a request that had to be done on the
Okay.
building. That's never come up.
Okay, excuse me. somebody should have told somebody that there is a variance request on the building. I don't think we need to consider the wetlands until we consider the whole 9 yards. Because if we consider the wetlands variance that you're asking for, it's kind of like, okay, we're gonna grant it for you, and then we're gonna bless a violation. And I
Right.
don't think it's fair for this board to do that.
Okay.
I think